Today I want to show you some cool patterns. There's some horizontal triad shapes moving through the chord family of a specific key. So I'm going to cover the key of G today, and I'm going to be referencing the big three triad shapes, which are close interval triad shapes that span all 6 strings. And there's 3 of these shapes, and they provide kind of a guidepost or scaffolding around all of the triad shapes that you can create on the guitar. You can combine them in different ways to come up with different voicings to play over songs or to create parts. And what I'm going to do specifically is try to tie all these together horizontally across the neck for you. So we're going to go through the 3 shapes, the big 3, and we're going to play each of the 3 string sets that you can create from those big 3 shapes. So there's going to be 12 positions in total that we're going to cover, and we're going to move through the chord scale, playing the chords of the scale in each shape. So we'll move through each string set in each inversion and play the full chord scale going up, and we'll have to do some adjustments when we get to the upper inversions, but I think this is going to be really helpful. What I hope that this helps with is your understanding of how you can connect across the entire fretboard in a single key using simple shapes, and how many different options you have to choose for those shapes depending on what kind of sound you're going for. So I'm going to provide a visual that goes along with this, and it maps out the fretboard with all the shapes that we're going to be looking at, and so you can follow along with that. You can find that for a free download at my website, practicemakesbettermusic.com, and if you're viewing this video there, it'll be right underneath the video, available for viewing or download. Like I said, I'm going to be starting in the key of G, and I'm going to be using the first inversion big 3 shape that starts here. And this is 5 of the 6 notes that are in your regular E major type bar chord. So this is a G major bar chord in the E shape. And if I raise that root note up to the 3rd and then arpeggiate the rest of the chord, now I've got all close intervals, 3rds and 4ths. I'm not skipping any notes of the chord. So if I take the first 3 strings, I'm going to be playing just the very top of that bar chord or that big 3 shape. And I'm going to start here. And this is my G major, my 1 chord in the key of G. And I'm going to move this shape up. And as you can see on the diagram, if I follow each of those notes up 1 step of the scale on the same string, I can see the shapes that I need to play in order to stay in the key. So here it's an A minor shape, just all barred on the same fret. I can move that up again to B minor. If I move up to C, I'm back to my major shape that I was playing here for G. If I go up to D, it's a major shape still. E minor is the minor shape, and then this is the diminished shape. So it's an F sharp diminished, and then I have my 1 chord again. I've gone up the whole octave. So before I go into the rest of these shapes, a good question to ask is, how can I use this? And one of the ways that this comes in really handy for me when I'm playing over different songs and progressions is that following one shape has a very specific sound. And I can follow a chord progression just with these shapes, and I can create interesting sounds and interesting parts. And it's using a single shape to move around makes it easier to play embellishments, because the notes are very similar in the way they feel under your hands when you're embellishing these chords. So if I played something a simple embellishment on the first string like that, I can play on all of these shapes. So that's one use for them. I'm going to move on now to the next string set out of this first inversion G big 3 shape. So now I'm on strings 2, 3, and 4, and I've got this really comfortable shape, and this is one of the best string sets for chording. It's a very comfortable string set for playing inversions and for playing these types of shapes. So I'm going to go through these. We have G major, And again, look at the second, third, and fourth strings on this chart, and look at the very next note on each string up the scale. So here's A minor, then we have B minor, then we have C major, and then D major, then we have E minor, and here's the diminished shape, which is a little bit more of a stretch. It's pinky, middle finger, and index finger. Then we're back to the G major, an octave up. When I did that just now, I used actually my third finger, because up here it's not as hard to play as it is down here. I would need to use my fourth finger for that diminished chord. So another way that these are useful, once you know multiple string sets, you can switch between them in the same position. So I could be playing on the second, third, and fourth strings, and then I could switch to the first, second, and third strings. I could switch back to the second, third, and fourth. Gives me more options to be switching vertically as well as moving horizontally in each string set. The next string set is the third, fourth, and fifth strings. And these are starting to get to what I think of as more like a meaty sound. It's just low end. There's a lot of low end when you get to playing two big strings next to each other like this. And we'll have more of that when we get to the fifth and sixth strings. So these voicings have less utility maybe. They sound good for certain things, but not always. It can get a little muddy, so just keep that in mind as you're playing these. So from G at the third, fourth, and fifth strings, I'm gonna go up G, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, and then here is my diminished shape, and that's F sharp diminished, and then G major. And of course these connect also to the other string sets we already did. And the final string set is the fourth, fifth, and sixth strings. And here you're going to get more of that low end sound that I was talking about. But we'll have our first inversion shape here. We're going to go up to A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, then F sharp diminished, which is kind of the inverse shape of the one that was on the third, fourth, and fifth strings, and then back to G major. So that covers all the string sets in the first position, first inversion, big three shape. And I hope that already you can see the usefulness of these patterns. And you can use the same chart that I was talking about and that I've had on the screen here in order to find the notes in the scale that surround the chord shapes that you're playing, and that'll help you embellish these chords in different ways. So use this chart. It's helpful to print it out and just kind of look at it as you're playing around in different areas of the guitar. Try embellishing different chords and try different chord patterns using these horizontal shapes. Next, I'm going to move up to the next inversion of the big three in the key of G. It's going to take me to second inversion, which the lowest note is D on the sixth string, and I'm going to move up this shape, which is just like an open C major shape taken up to G at the 10th fret. So I'm going to do the same thing with this shape that I did with the last one, and just keep in mind that this is going to get tight up top as we approach, you know, especially these low chords coming up all the way here and playing on the 22nd fret. So at any point when you pass the 12th fret, you can always move these shapes down an octave and continue from there. And we'll be doing some of that as we move along, especially in the next position. So my first 3-string shape is just this simple shape, like a D chord, moved up to G. At the G here is on the 2nd string at the 8th fret. So here's just a D chord. I'm going to move up the chord scale from here. So I go G, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G major on the tiny frets up here. I can still make it though. So again, you can use these for embellishing. And now that we're into the second shape, you can also mix and match with the other inversions. So if I remembered that when I was playing this shape, my C chord is here, I've got a G chord here. Then so I got G, I've got a C. So that's one way I could play that particular progression. I'm going to move to the next string set, which is strings 2, 3, and 4. And I'll move up through the chord scale. This is a first inversion because the B is on bottom on the 4th string. So I'll move up G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G major. And it's getting pretty tight up there, but I'm going to stick with it. So I'm going to move to the next string set. I've got the root position with my G on the 5th string, 1, 3, 5, and I'm going to move up G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp minor, and G major. At the last fret that I have, maybe you have 24 frets, I have 22. So our next shape is going to be on strings 4, 5, and 6, and this is a second inversion with the 5th on the bottom, D at the 6th string, 10th fret. And these are a little muddy, but we'll do them anyway because they're there and they work. So this is the G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, and oh man, I can barely even do it. Almost. Okay. But if I was going to move that down an octave as I'm going, I could go. And then here on that C, I could move down to D here and just continue. That's probably much easier for all these shapes. So I'll tie it into what I was talking about with how to apply these, moving vertically and horizontally. So I can move in these positions. I can create melodic ideas and movement just moving between the different inversions in the string sets, but then I can change the chords by just moving horizontally. And then if I combine some of the inversions, like if I take that C chord that I talked about earlier, I have a lot of options to move vertically and horizontally across the neck and cover the entirety of the whole neck in one key. So I'm going to move on now to the final shape. So now I'm going to move to the final shape, which is the root position G major big 3 shape, starting from G at the 6th string, 15th fret. and I'm going to move through the chord families of each string set just like I did before. This time, each time that I hit a D chord, I'm going to move it down an octave. So I'm going to start here. Got G major, A minor, B minor, C major, and here we're going to move down an octave to D, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major. Now I've got this chord, which is all barred at the 12th fret, G major in second inversion because the D is the lowest note on the 4th string. And we're going to go from G major to A minor to B minor to C, down to D, E minor, F sharp diminished, and G major. Next we'll move down strings 3, 4, 5, G major, A minor, B minor, C major, down to D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major. And our final string set is going to be root position on the 6th, 5th, and 4th strings. So we got G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp minor, G major. So those are all the chord family patterns that you can do with these 3 string shapes from the big 3. And that gives you plenty of options to work with. I would say the most useful ones are the ones on the 1st through 3rd strings, 1st, 2nd, 3rd string, and the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings. Those are the ones that I use the most, but these lower shapes are great for soloing and connecting arpeggios together, so they're great to know as well. If you found this helpful, spend some time looking at the PDF. You can go download it at my site, practicemakesbettermusic.com, and look at these fretboard maps and try to play through horizontally and vertically and improvise with different chord progressions. So pick a chord progression. I would start with just 2 chord patterns where you're just vamping the same amount of time on both chords. I think that playing with improvisation and learning to embellish with the notes that surround each chord in that simple context is the best way to really get the idea in your head and under your fingers. And then you could advance and play over 4 chord patterns, like a 1, 5, 6, 4 or something like that, some kind of popular type of pattern. And you can mix them all up, but start with simple ones like 1 to 2 and back and forth and improvise with them. You could do moving through the different horizontal shapes as well as moving vertically. And trying different combinations, but always using kind of these big 3 triad shapes to guide you across, because it really provides a framework in which you can know all the notes that are available for you to play in a certain situation. So I think these are really important, and I hope that these horizontal shapes prove helpful for you in furthering your understanding of the neck, but then also just as cool patterns that you can use in your playing.